Today, Russia raised the proposals that they published in December, aimed at addressing their security concerns. These include demands to stop admitting any new members to NATO and to withdraw forces from Eastern allies. Allies on their side reaffirmed NATO's open door policy and the right for each nation to choose its own security arrangements. Allies made clear that they will not renounce their ability to protect and defend each other, including with presence of troops in the eastern part of the alliance. NATO allies are clear-eyed about the prospects for progress in these talks. They expressed serious concern about the Russian military build-up in and around Ukraine and called on Russia to immediately de-escalate the situation and to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighbors.
Russia 1. You spoke about de-escalation and about Russian troops on the Russian territory. Do you really believe that new military exercises and sending weapons into Ukraine, which is foreign to the NATO allies for now territory, do you really believe that this helps the de-escalation?
Ukraine is a sovereign nation. Ukraine has the right to self-defense. Ukraine is not a threat to Russia. Russia has the biggest land power in Europe. They are one or two major nuclear powers. They have invested heavily in new modern capabilities over the last years. But not only that, Russia has used military force against Ukraine before. In 2014, they occupied and took a part of Ukraine, Crimea, and they continue to illegally occupy Crimea, and they control through the separatists in eastern Ukraine, Donbass. So the whole idea that in a way Ukraine threatens Russia is absolutely to put the whole thing upside down. It is Russia that is the aggressor. It is Russia that has used force and continue to use force against Ukraine. And then they are building up with around 100,000 troops, artillery, armor, drones, tens of thousands of combat-ready troops, and threatening rhetoric. So, of course, that's the problem. This crisis is a making of Russia. And therefore, it is important that they de-escalate. Ukraine has the right to self-defense. That's enshrined in the UN founding charter. And, of course, some NATO allies and NATO help them to uphold that right to self-defense.
Lorne Cook from Associated Press. Secretary General, President Putin had an agreement, a draft agreement that he wanted to discuss with NATO. Did the Russian delegation put that agreement on the table today? And you've rejected the core principles of that. So is it off the table completely now? Thank you.
So Russia has put that proposal, that treaty on the table. I've sent it to the United States and to NATO, and of course they also went through those proposals, presented those proposals in the meeting today, and argued in favor of these proposals. NATO allies made it clear that, of course, we are open for dialogue. We can discuss many issues, but we cannot discuss some core principles, like, for instance, the freedom to choose your own path, including what kind of security arrangements each and every country in Europe wants to be part of, and our right to defend all allies, including Eastern allies.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. It looks like that one of the aims of the new Russian threats for European security is to divert the attention from already existing violations of international law, including occupation of Crimea, including occupation of certain areas of Donbass, unauthorized presence also in Moldova, military presence in Moldova and Georgia. So my question is if allies preserve unity in that circumstances around those issues, and are they going to continue to solve it? And one short follow-up, if I may. Russia demands some kind of guarantees from NATO and USA. But what kind of guarantees NATO would like to see from the side of Russia in terms of security? Thank you.
So Russia has military forces in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Crimea, and also in Moldova. And these forces are there without the consent of the governments of these countries. They are uninvited and not welcomed. And NATO allies, also in the meeting today, called on Russia to withdraw those forces and to respect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Georgia, of Ukraine, of Moldova. And again, this is fundamental principles to respect the borders of all countries for peace and security in Europe. And NATO allies are ready to engage in dialogue with Russia, but we will not compromise on core principles. We will not compromise on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of every nation in Europe. And we will not compromise on the right for all countries to choose their own path, including what kind of security arrangements they want to be part of. And we will not compromise on the right for allies to protect and defend each other. Then what allies raised with Russia today was actually a wide range of different issues. The focus was on Ukraine and the implications for European security. But of course it is of concern that the military buildup we see in and around Ukraine, and that military buildup continues. That is part of a pattern where Russia has used force against different countries, and where Russia has also used cyber against NATO allies. We have seen the use of chemical weapons on European territory, and we also see that Russia is very also oppressive against democratic opposition at home. So NATO engages in these talks, the dialogue in good faith. We are ready to sit down and discuss substance. We are ready to put proposals on the table, concrete proposals. And then at the same time, we have to be prepared for that this does not, that Russia once again chooses confrontation. And therefore, we also made it very clear that any use of force against Ukraine will be a severe and serious strategic mistake by Russia, and it will have severe consequences, and Russia will have to pay a high price.
Secretary General Greg Palcott, Fox News. You have said, and I quote, if these talks fail, NATO would be ready for a new armed conflict. You have been in the room with the Russians now for several hours. What is your feeling? What is your gut? How close are we to a new armed conflict?
There is a real risk for a new armed conflict in Europe, but that's exactly why the meeting today and the other meetings that take place this week are so important, because we will do what we can to prevent a new armed conflict. And that's the reason why we are so clear in our message to Russia that we are ready to sit down, list a long range of issues, arms control, reciprocal limits on missiles and many other issues, to prevent a new armed conflict. At the same time, we are clear-eyed. So we also convey a message to Russia that if they use military force, there will be severe consequences, economic sanctions, political sanctions. We provide support, practical support to Ukraine to strengthen their ability to defend themselves. Allies do that in different ways. Then I think it's important in a way to also understand that Ukraine is a partner. We provide them support, political, practical support in many different ways, but Ukraine is not a NATO member. So the security guarantees, what we call Article 5, one for all for one, That applies for NATO members. And that's also the reason why we so clearly have stated that we will do what it takes to defend all NATO allies. An attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. And that is clearly